Hello, I am Xarkun, and this is World of Warships Legends. Today, our lecture is sponsored by the Xarkun School of Kiting, a somewhat defunct university whose graduation rate is a mere embarrassing 0.69%. Many students have enrolled at the Xarkun School of Kiting, few have graduated. They all seem to make the same mistake when you see them out there on the high seas. They kite to oblivion. They kite with no purpose. They kite and they get out of position and can't do anything to affect the outcome of the battle. Well, this match here, featuring the Tier 7 premium Soviet battleship Borodino, will demonstrate the value of kiting and what to do or when to stop kiting. Let's just put it that way. You see here we spawn on the Charlie Cap. There's a Nelson, there's an Azuma out there. Already we're beginning to kite. Why? Well, because there's three other battleships over there to the right of the screen that are approaching this direction behind the Nelson. If we were to push bow in and simply stop, then we're going to find ourselves focused by not only the Nelson, but also by the three battleships behind him and the Azuma. We wouldn't be floating for too long, so what we need to do is kite away. And of course, this ship is not necessarily suited to kiting. It's got all of its main battery firepower on the front. The guns are at the bow, in other words, so that might incentivize you to think you must bow tank at all times, but no. Even in a ship like this, you can engage in the action of kiting. Now, it should be said that it's helpful to have good teammates. And take note of the Harbin in the smokescreen near us, who's launching torpedoes at the Azuma and at the ships in this area in general. And also the Kagero, who's over off toward the flank, and his torpedoes are sailing through the cap too. Both of these guys will be instrumental to our success here. You do, in fact, need teammates to help you out. The torpedoes that these guys are providing are doing damage, and they're helping us whittle down the opposition here quickly. The Azuma, in fact, is about to go back to port with the Citadel we got through the bow. Should just be one more salvo before he goes down, or maybe the Harbin will even finish off the Azuma with his guns. Hard to say. Plus, we've got another cruiser that's sort of behind the island in the Bravo cap. He's also shooting over here. And one of them helps us take down the Azuma so that we get a fisting ribbon. But that's fine. That means we've just got the battleships left in this flank. There's still four, though, so we don't want to quite turn around yet. But actually, we are in sort of a scenario where we can think about pushing back in. The idea is if we did push into all of these ships together, we wouldn't be floating for too long. You can see we're at half HP already. Nelson goes down with two Citadels toward the bow. It helps that I've played that ship over 500 times. I know exactly where to shoot it. Not that difficult, of course. Just aim at the bow. He goes down. Bismarck is in the smoke screen. He's got torpedoes going toward the smoke screen, or he's about to be there. He's turning in, but he's on low HP. He's got Kagero to torpedo him. He's got the Harbin and another cruiser to shoot at him. And then we've got the Amagi out there 11 kilometers away. Because the herd has been thinned out so much, the enemy team has lost 4 ships in the span of 4 minutes. Now would be the time where it would be okay to try pushing. So as you can see, we have ceased kiting. We're going to use the radar, mostly because we wanted vision of the Amagi, but happily, we catch the Fletcher. Now, of course, if you weren't in a battleship with radar, you might not have seen this guy. But as soon as he came around the corner, actually, you would have known that you were spotted by a destroyer because the Bismarck is dead, thanks to the Kagero. And so the Amagi, at the time the Fletcher came around the corner, was not spotting us. Therefore, we would have known that we were spotted by a destroyer. So, since the destroyer came out broadside in front of us, he obviously launched torpedoes. We come to a complete stop. We were sailing off to the right. We now sail off to the left. This will throw off the torpedoes completely. There they are. Missed them without even having to have sonar, but we know that the Fletcher is still there. So we're going to perform a maneuver that I like to call the Nelson Shuffle. It's something you can do with any ship that has all the guns on the front. You just point your bow generally towards the threat like we're doing now, but then you make zigzag motions in the water about every time you shoot your gun, so every 30 seconds or so. I don't know exactly when the Fletcher would have more torpedoes. He probably doesn't right now, which is why he's shooting at us with his main battery guns. But it's always a good habit to get into. If you zig and you zag, it makes it much more difficult for the torpedoes to hit you. Now, maybe we should be shooting at Fletcher, and maybe we should have been the whole time, but my thought process was our bow is overmatchable by Amagi, and so he needs to be taken care of first before we deal with the Fletcher. Unfortunately, we're just not getting good results with the main battery guns and the AP against the Amagi, so we switched to HE to shoot at the Fletcher at least once, take away about a third of his remaining HP, and now we do have to concentrate our efforts on the Amagi. We may be able to get one last shot here on the Fletcher. We are bow into the Amagi. I don't think he can hit our Citadel because of the icebreaker, but he can still overmatch the upper bow armor, and that could send us back to port. One last shot at the Fletcher. Switching to AP, we hit the Fletcher once, not quite enough to take him out, but he's on low HP now, and hopefully the Kagero in the cap will be able to finish him off. Amagi, on the other hand, has been sailing broadside to us this entire time with no punishment. His actions need to be corrected, so we'll Citadel him and send him back to port. That gets us up to 127,000 damage, and now the Fletcher is toast. So only one cruiser is left. This game turned into a little bit of a blowout, partially because the enemy team put all their eggs in one basket. They had 5 battleships on this team. They sent 4 of them to the Charlie Cap to push into the Kagero, to the Harbin, and myself. The result was all of them sunk, in part because of the torpedoes from the Harbin and the Kagero. You certainly don't want to be pushing into torpedoes right as the game begins, and also in part thanks to our firepower, which we were able to preserve because of kiting. Again, if we had pushed straight into the Charlie Cap with the 4 battleships and the Azuma, and apparently the Fletcher, which we weren't aware of until later on in the match, then we would have simply sunk. But sailing away from the enemy allowed us to stay angled, lessened the overmatch through our bow by the battleships, and it allowed us to get some crucial damage on some capital ships in this cap. Once they were sunk, we turned back around, the herds thinned out, we have a much easier time fighting the Amagi, essentially 1v1, as well as the Fletcher, and we win the battle. So there is a quick lesson in kiting, courtesy of the Xarkun School of Kiting. The key takeaway that you should leave this video with is that if you are going to engage in kiting, there's a time to do it, namely when you're outnumbered or when you're facing superior numbers. And then, once that advantage for the enemy team goes away, you turn back in and you push in. The biggest mistake people make is not turning back around to push in. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.